Officer Marcus Draven had been with the Atlanta Police Department for 9 years when he made a decision that would end a 7-year-old girl's life, destroy his career, and cost the city $31.2 million. He was 34 years old, experienced enough to recognize a medical emergency, but apparently convinced that his instincts about who looked like a doctor were more reliable than the reality unfolding in front of him. One Saturday afternoon in June, in a crowded shopping center parking lot, he responded to a call about a commotion and found a black man leaning over a small white girl. What Draven did next: pulling a trained physician away from a dying child, handcuffing him while the girl's brain went without oxygen, and refusing to listen to a dozen witnesses screaming that the man was trying to save her, would become proof of how racial bias doesn't just destroy careers and cost millions. Sometimes it kills. A black man in his late 30s, Dr. Marcus Webb, was kneeling on hot asphalt in the parking lot of Piedmont Plaza, his dress shirt soaked with sweat, his hands pressed against a child's chest in precise rhythm. His hospital ID badge hung from his belt loop. No crime, no assault, no danger, just a cardiac surgeon trying to save a life. But Officer Draven saw him through a filter so warped by assumptions about who saves lives and who takes them that he couldn't process a black man in business casual as anything other than a threat. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Piedmont Plaza Shopping Center sits at the intersection of Peachtree Road and Piedmont Avenue in Buckhead, one of Atlanta's most affluent neighborhoods. It's the kind of upscale outdoor mall that caters to families with money: Whole Foods, Anthropologie, Lululemon, a French bakery, a high-end toy store, wide sidewalks, manicured landscaping, valet parking on weekends. The clientele is predictable, mostly white, mostly wealthy, mostly comfortable. It was 20:47 p.m. on a Saturday in June. The Georgia heat was oppressive, pushing 94 degrees under cloudless skies. The parking lot was packed. Families loaded groceries into SUVs. Teenagers clustered outside the smoothie shop. Parents pushed strollers toward the ice cream place. The ambient hum of weekend suburban life. Car doors closing, shopping carts rattling, children laughing. The kind of Saturday afternoon where nothing dramatic typically happens, until it does. Dr. Marcus Webb had been a pediatric cardiac surgeon at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta for 12 years. 12 years performing some of the most complex, high-stakes surgeries in medicine: congenital heart defects, transplants, emergency interventions on children whose hearts were failing. He'd completed over 3,000 surgeries. He'd saved children who weren't supposed to survive. His colleagues called him steady. His patients' families called him a miracle worker. Webb had graduated summa cum laude from Morehouse College, then earned his medical degree from Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, where he'd been recruited into one of the most competitive surgical residency programs in the country. He'd completed his residency at Boston Children's Hospital, followed by a fellowship in pediatric cardiothoracic surgery at Stanford. He'd published research in the Journal of Thoracic and Cardiovascular Surgery. He'd lectured at medical conferences across the country. He'd received the Humanitarian Award from the American Academy of Pediatrics for his volunteer work providing cardiac care to underserved communities in rural Georgia. At 38 years old, Marcus Webb was exactly where he'd worked to be. He was married with 2 young daughters. He coached his oldest daughter's soccer team. He volunteered at his church's medical clinic. He ran marathons. He was respected, accomplished, and careful, the kind of careful that black men in white spaces learn to be. That Saturday afternoon, Webb had finished morning rounds at the hospital and stopped at Piedmont Plaza to pick up groceries for a family barbecue. He'd parked near the Whole Foods entrance, grabbed a cart, and was walking toward the store when he heard screaming. A woman's voice. Panicked, desperate. "Help! Somebody help! My baby isn't breathing!" Webb's training took over immediately. He dropped his cart and ran toward the sound. 30 feet away, near a silver Lexus SUV, a woman was kneeling on the asphalt, cradling a small girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, limp, lips turning blue. Webb reached them in seconds. "I'm a doctor. What happened?" The mother looked up, her face streaked with tears. "She just collapsed. We were walking to the car and she just fell. She's not breathing. I don't know CPR. Please help her." Webb dropped to his knees. He checked for a pulsing. He tilted the girl's head back, checked her airway. Clear, but no breath sounds. "Cardiac arrest. Call 911, he said to the growing crowd. "Tell them we need paramedics for a pediatric cardiac arrest." Then he started compressions. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. 30 compressions, 2 rescue breaths. The rhythm was automatic, drilled into him through years of training. His hands moved with precision. Fingers interlaced. Heel of his palm on the center of her chest, compression depth exactly right for a child her size. He wore khaki slacks and a light blue button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hospital ID badge, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Dr. Marcus Webb, Pediatric Cardiac Surgery, was clipped to his belt loop, visible to anyone who bothered to look. He looked like what he was, a physician responding to an emergency. He'd done nothing to attract suspicion. He'd violated no law. He was trying to save a child's life. But to one person driving past that parking lot, Marcus Webb's presence was a problem, and that person had decided to do something about it. Officer Marcus Draven was 34 years old. He'd been a patrol officer with the Atlanta Police Department for 9 years, assigned to Zone 2, which included Buckhead and some of Atlanta's wealthiest neighborhoods. He was assertive, quick to respond, and deeply concerned about maintaining what he called order in high-income areas. His supervisors described him as results-oriented but sometimes aggressive in his approach to unfamiliar situations. In 9 years, Draven had compiled a record that should have raised concerns at every supervisory level: 14 complaints. 14. 9 of them involved allegations of excessive force or racial profiling against black men in predominantly white areas. 4 had been sustained, resulting in written reprimands and mandatory de-escalation training. The other 10 had been closed with findings of not sustained or insufficient evidence, despite witness statements and video footage suggesting otherwise. Draven had a pattern. He escalated situations involving black men in affluent spaces, particularly when those men were interacting with white women or children. A black delivery driver dropping off packages in a gated community was detained for 30 minutes while Draven verified his employment, despite the company logo on his truck and uniform. Complaint filed. Training completed. A black teenager talking to a white girl outside a Starbucks was questioned about whether he was bothering her. The girl said they were classmates working on a school project. Draven suggested the boy move along anyway. Complaint filed. Training completed. A black man jogging through Chastain Park was stopped and asked where he was going. The man lived 2 blocks away and ran the same route daily. Draven asked for ID anyway. Complaint filed. Training completed. The pattern was documented. The complaints were clear. But Draven remained on patrol, his record buried in a personnel file that supervisors reviewed, but never acted on. That Saturday afternoon, Draven was driving north on Peachtree Road when he saw a commotion in the Piedmont Plaza parking lot. People running. Someone on the ground. A crowd forming. His radio crackled. Dispatch was sending units to a possible assault at that location. Draven activated his lights and pulled into the parking lot. From his patrol car, he saw what he expected to see: a black man leaning over a small white girl, surrounded by onlookers. In Draven's mind, the narrative was obvious. Black man, white child, crowd gathering, assault in progress. He didn't see the precise compressions. He didn't notice the hospital badge. He didn't hear the mother begging the man to keep going. He saw what his bias told him to see. Draven exited his vehicle and approached at a fast walk, hand already moving toward his weapon. Do you think officers should face automatic termination after 5 sustained complaints for racial profiling? Drop your answer below. Dr. Webb was focused entirely on the child. He'd been performing CPR for nearly 4 minutes. His arms burned. Sweat dripped down his face. But he couldn't stop. Every second mattered. The girl's brain was being deprived of oxygen. If he could keep her perfused until paramedics arrived with advanced equipment, she had a chance. Come on, sweetheart, stay with me. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. Check for pulse. Nothing yet. The mother knelt beside him, sobbing. Is she going to be okay? Please tell me she's going to be okay. I'm doing everything I can. Just keep everyone back. Give us space. Then Webb heard boots on asphalt. Fast. Purposeful. He glanced up and saw a police officer approaching, hand on his weapon. Step away from her. Now, Webb didn't stop compressions. I'm a doctor. She's not breathing. I'm performing CPR. I said step away. Officer, she's in cardiac arrest. I need you to clear a path for the ambulance. They should be here any minute. The crowd had grown to more than 20 people. Several were recording on their phones. A man called out, he's trying to save her, he's a doctor. Draven ignored them. His focus locked on Webb. Step away from that child or you're under arrest. Webb's hands paused for half a second. He looked up at Draven, trying to process what was happening. If I stop, she dies. I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon. This child has no pulse. Look at my badge. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Draven's eyes flicked to the ID badge on Webb's belt, but his expression didn't change. Anyone can buy a fake badge. Hands behind your back. The mother's voice rose in panic. What are you doing? He's helping her. My baby needs him. Mom, step back. This man was assaulting your daughter when I arrived. Assaulting? The mother's voice broke. He's saving her life. Don't stop. Please don't stop. This is where bias becomes impenetrable. Officer Draven had responded to a call, seen a black man over a white child, and constructed a narrative so complete, so unshakable that no amount of evidence, not the hospital ID, not the mother's pleas, not the crowd's testimony, could penetrate it. In his mind, he was protecting a child. In reality, he was killing her. Webb made a decision. He looked directly at the crowd. I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, pediatric cardiac surgeon. This officer is ordering me to stop lifesaving CPR on a child in cardiac arrest. I need everyone to record this. Every second counts. He turned back to the child and resumed compressions. 32 breaths. 32 breaths. Draven's hand closed around his taser. Final warning. Officer, if you do this child will die. The mother screamed. Don't touch him. Let him help her. Someone in the crowd shouted. The ambulance is coming. I can hear the sirens. Just wait. But Draven had made his decision. He grabbed Webb's shoulder and yanked him backward, away from the child. Webb's hands lifted from the girl's chest. No, don't. Draven spun him around, grabbed his wrist, and twisted his arm behind his back. You're under arrest for assault. The compressions stopped. The child lay motionless on the asphalt, no one performing CPR, her lips darkening from blue to gray. I'm complying, Webb said, his voice loud and clear for the witnesses. But this child needs CPR immediately. Someone else needs to start compressions right now. The mother lunged toward her daughter. I don't know how. I don't know CPR. A woman from the crowd rushed forward.
I do. I took a class.
She dropped to her knees and started compressions, but her technique was hesitant, the depth insufficient, the rhythm inconsistent. Draven snapped handcuffs on Webb's wrists, the metal biting into skin. You have the right to remain silent. Webb's voice was steady, clinical, even as rage simmered beneath. That woman is not compressing deep enough. The child's brain is going without oxygen. You need to let me continue. You assaulted a child. You're done. The sirens grew louder. Seconds later, an ambulance pulled into the parking lot. 2 paramedics jumped out, assessed the scene. Unconscious child, woman performing inadequate CPR, police officer with someone in handcuffs. They ran to the child, took over compressions, checked vitals, started advanced life support. One of them looked up at Draven. How long was she down? Webb answered before Draven could. Approximately 7 minutes total. I performed CPR for 5 minutes before the officer stopped me. She's been without adequate compressions for the last 2 minutes. The lead paramedic's eyes widened. You're the one who was doing CPR. I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, pediatric cardiac surgeon at Children's Healthcare. I started compressions immediately when she arrested. This officer pulled me away. The paramedic's face went pale. He looked at Draven. You stopped a cardiac surgeon from performing CPR. He was assaulting the child. He was saving her. Should officers be required to verify medical credentials before interrupting life-saving care? Let me know what you think. The paramedics worked frantically. IV access, epinephrine, intubation. But the girl had been without effective compressions for too long. The damage was done. They loaded her into the ambulance. The mother climbed in beside her, still sobbing. One paramedic turned to Draven. We're transporting to Children's Healthcare. Critical condition. You need to call this in. Draven's radio crackled. A supervisor was en route. Webb stood in handcuffs, watching the ambulance pull away. Lights flashing, siren wailing. He knew what was going to happen. He'd seen enough pediatric cardiac arrests to understand the timeline. 7 minutes without oxygen. Permanent brain damage was almost certain. Survival was unlikely. Captain Brenda Holloway arrived 6 minutes later. She was a 19-year veteran. The kind of supervisor who'd seen officers make mistakes but rarely one this catastrophic. She stepped out of her vehicle and immediately scanned the scene. Crowd of witnesses, phones recording, officer with a man in handcuffs, people shouting. She approached Draven. What happened here? Draven began to explain. Dispatch reported a possible assault. I arrived and found this man on top of a child. He refused to stop when I ordered him to. I had to physically remove him and make an arrest. Holloway turned to Webb. And who are you? Webb's voice was calm, measured, but fury burned underneath. I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, pediatric cardiac surgeon at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. That child went into cardiac arrest. I performed CPR. Her mother asked me to help. I identified myself as a physician. I showed this officer my hospital ID. He arrested me anyway and stopped me from providing life-saving care. The child was without adequate CPR for over 2 minutes because of this officer's actions. Holloway's expression hardened. Show me the ID. Draven reached into Webb's pocket and pulled out the hospital badge. Holloway examined it closely. The photo matched. The credentials looked legitimate. Did you call the hospital to verify? Draven hesitated. I didn't have time. He was assaulting. He was performing CPR. Holloway's voice cut like steel. She turned to the crowd. Did anyone witness what happened before the officer arrived? Multiple people spoke at once. He was helping her. The mom asked him to help. He's a doctor. He told the cop he was a doctor. The cop didn't care. Holloway pulled out her radio and made a call. Within 3 minutes, she had confirmation. Marcus Webb, attending physician. Pediatric cardiac surgery. 12 years at Children's Healthcare. Impeccable record. She turned to Draven, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. Take those cuffs off. Now. Captain Holloway watched as Draven unlocked the handcuffs. Webb rubbed his wrists. Red marks were visible where the metal had pressed into skin. Dr. Webb, Holloway said, her voice formal but carrying genuine regret. On behalf of the Atlanta Police Department, I apologize. This should never have happened. Webb's response was measured. Your apology doesn't change what happened. That child was without effective CPR for over 2 minutes because your officer chose to see a black man as a criminal instead of a doctor. Her chances of survival just dropped significantly. If she dies, this department killed her. The crowd had gone silent. Phones were still recording. Holloway turned to Draven, badge and weapon. You're on administrative leave effective immediately. Captain, I was responding to a call. You stopped a cardiac surgeon from saving a child's life because you couldn't imagine that a black man might be a doctor. Give me your badge. Draven's hands shook as he unclipped his badge and unholstered his weapon. He handed them over. For the first time, understanding seemed to dawn on his face. What he'd done. What he'd cost. Holloway took them and turned back to Webb. You'll be contacted by Internal Affairs. You'll need to give a full statement. I know you have every right to pursue legal action, and I won't insult you by asking you not to, but I want you to know, this officer's actions do not represent this department. Webb's voice was quiet, dangerous. Captain, in the last 9 years, how many complaints has Officer Draven accumulated? Holloway's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. Because I'm guessing this isn't the first time he's escalated a situation involving a black man in an affluent area. And I'm guessing those complaints are documented somewhere. Which means your department knew he had a pattern and left him on patrol anyway. Holloway had no response. I need to get to the hospital, Webb said. That child is being transported to my facility. If she survives, she'll need surgery. I need to be there. One of the paramedics from a second ambulance that had arrived approached. Dr. Webb, I can give you a ride. Webb nodded and started walking toward the ambulance. He paused and looked back at the crowd. Thank you for recording this. Make sure those videos don't disappear. Should officers with patterns of racial profiling be removed from duty before they cause deaths? Drop your answer. Within an hour, the videos had exploded across social media. Multiple angles, clear audio, a pediatric surgeon performing CPR, a police officer ordering him to stop, a mother begging the officer to let the doctor save her daughter. The arrest, the handcuffs, the 2 minutes without adequate compressions. Black doctor arrested while performing CPR on dying child surgeon handcuffed mid-CPR. Officer couldn't believe he was real. Atlanta officer stops cardiac surgeon from saving 7-year-old girl. The outrage was immediate and overwhelming. The American Medical Association issued a statement condemning the arrest. The American Academy of Pediatrics called for federal investigation. Civil rights organizations demanded accountability. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta released a statement supporting Dr. Webb and announcing that he remained on staff. 7-year-old Emma Castellano arrived at Children's Healthcare in critical condition. Despite aggressive resuscitation efforts, she died 4 hours later. Because of death, cardiac arrest, prolonged hypoxic brain injury. The medical examiner's report would later note that the 2-minute gap in adequate CPR was a contributing factor. Officer Marcus Draven's life imploded within days. He was placed on administrative leave. The Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation. His personnel file, including all 14 complaints, was leaked to the media. The pattern was undeniable. Draven issued a brief statement through his attorney. I believed I was protecting a child. I now understand I was tragically wrong. My deepest condolences to the Castellano family. It meant nothing. Dr. Marcus Webb retained Benjamin Crump, one of the nation's most prominent civil rights attorneys. The lawsuit was filed 3 weeks later. It named Officer Marcus Draven, Captain Brenda Holloway for supervisory failure, the Atlanta Police Department, and the City of Atlanta. The claims were comprehensive and devastating. Unlawful detention and false arrest without probable cause, a violation of federal civil rights under 42 U.S.C. For 1983's racial profiling and discrimination as excessive force and unlawful restraint, intentional infliction of emotion distress, wrongful interference with medical care, wrongful death on behalf of the Castellano family, failure to supervise officers with documented patterns of discriminatory conduct, the complaint and personal recourse and personal record. 14 complaints over 9 years, 9 involving racial profiling, 4 sustained, 10 ignored. All documented, all dismissed with training that never changed behavior. The city's attorneys reviewed the evidence and reached an inescapable conclusion: indefensible. The videos were everywhere. The witnesses were credible. A child was dead. The family had lost a daughter. A doctor had been arrested for saving a life. The city settled 14 months later to $31.2 million split between Dr. Marcus Webb and the Castellano family. No $18.7 million to the family for wrongful death. $5.5 million to Dr. Webb for civil rights violations, emotional distress, and reputational harm. Officer Marcus Draven was terminated 11 weeks after Emma's death. The termination letter was final and unambiguous. Officer Draven interfered with life-saving medical care, arrested a physician without probable cause, and engaged in racial profiling that directly contributed to the death of a 7-year-old child. Despite 14 prior complaints and multiple training interventions, Officer Draven continued to demonstrate a pattern of discriminatory policing. His employment is terminated immediately and without appeal. Draven's name was entered into the National Desertification Index. His law enforcement career ended at 34. He faced no criminal charges. Prosecutors determined that while his actions were negligent and discriminatory, they didn't meet the threshold for criminal culpability. Emma Castellano's mother, Victoria, released a statement. Our daughter died because an officer couldn't imagine that a black man might be trying to save her instead of hurt her. Dr. Webb did everything right. Officer Draven did everything wrong, and our family will live with the consequences forever. Dr. Marcus Webb testified before the Atlanta City Council 9 months after Emma's death. The chambers were packed. His testimony was quiet, controlled, devastating. I'm a pediatric cardiac surgeon. I've been practicing for 12 years. I've performed over 3,000 surgeries on children with congenital heart defects. I've saved children who weren't supposed to survive. That's what I do. That's who I am. He paused, his hands gripping the podium. On June 14th, I was walking through a parking lot in Buckhead when I heard a mother screaming that her child wasn't breathing. I ran to help because that's what doctors do. I started CPR because that little girl was dying and I had the training to save her. I identified myself clearly. I showed my hospital credentials. I explained what I was doing, and I was arrested anyway. Another pause. The room was silent. Officer Draven saw a black man touching a white child, and his brain filled in a narrative so powerful that reality couldn't compete. My credentials didn't matter. The mother's pleas didn't matter. The witnesses didn't matter. He saw what his bias told him to see. His voice hardened. 14 complaints in 9 years. That's not bad luck. That's not a few mistakes. That's a pattern. A pattern your department documented, filed, and ignored. 4 of those complaints were sustained. And Officer Draven remained on patrol, free to continue profiling black men in white spaces until he finally did what I always feared someone like him would do. He killed a child. He looked directly at the council members. Emma Castellano died because Officer Draven stopped me from saving her. She went 2 full minutes without adequate CPR, 2 minutes where her brain was starving for oxygen. The medical examiner confirmed that gap contributed to her death. If Officer Draven had verified my credentials, if he'd listened to witnesses, if he'd spent 30 seconds calling the hospital, Emma might be alive. Another pause. The city paid $31.2 million. That's acknowledgement. That's accountability. But it doesn't bring Emma back. It doesn't undo the trauma her family lives with every day. It doesn't erase what happened to Miv, a physician arrested for doing his job, handcuffed in front of dozens of people, humiliated, criminalized. His voice dropped. If this can happen to me, a surgeon with a hospital ID, with witnesses, with a mother begging the officer to let me continue, what happens to black men who don't have credentials? What happens to people who don't have the resources to fight back? What happens to people whose encounters with biased officers don't end with settlements, but with graves? The council chamber remained silent. Should police departments face federal intervention after officer actions result in preventable deaths? Drop your answer. This wasn't just about one officer in one parking lot on one summer afternoon. This was about a system that let Marcus Draven accumulate 14 complaints, 9 involving racial profiling, 4 sustained, and never removed him from the streets. Draven's record told the story his supervisors chose to ignore. 14 complaints over 9 years, all involving the same pattern. Black men in affluent spaces, interactions escalated, rights violated, complaints filed. Each incident was treated in isolation. Each complaint resulted in training that changed nothing. The pattern was documented. The evidence was overwhelming. But the Atlanta Police Department, like so many departments across this country, treated patterns like individual incidents, dismissed complaints as he said, and kept officers with clear biases on patrol until those biases killed someone. Marcus Draven's career is over. That's justice. The city paid out $31.2 million. That's accountability. Emma Castellano's family received a settlement. That's acknowledgement. But settlements don't bring children back. Terminations don't restore trust. Money doesn't undo the trauma of watching your daughter die because an officer's bias was more powerful than a doctor's training. The real question is, what changes now? Do departments finally remove officers after 4 sustained complaints instead of 14? Do supervisors finally recognize patterns at complaint 3 instead of waiting until someone dies at complaint 14? Do we finally acknowledge that no amount of training fixes bias that's already cost lives? Because if we don't fix the system that kept Draven on patrol despite years of documented discriminatory conduct, if we don't address the culture that teaches officers to see black men as threats, even when they're wearing hospital ID badges and performing CPR, then we're just waiting for the next Marcus Draven, the next Marcus Webb, the next Emma Castellano, the next family destroyed by bias backed by a badge. Comment if you believe this should be federal law. Any officer who interferes with verified medical care during an emergency faces immediate termination and permanent decertification. And if you think these stories need to be told, if you believe accountability begins with awareness and change starts with pressure, then hit that subscribe button. Because we're not stopping. We're going to keep exposing the patterns departments try to hide. We're going to keep demanding that complaints result in consequences before they result in deaths. We're going to keep fighting for the Dr. Webbs, the Emma Castellanos, the families who deserve better than a system that protects bias over life. This isn't just about one officer, one doctor, or one child. It's about all of us and the world we choose to accept. A world where a black man with a medical degree and a hospital badge is still seen as a criminal before he's seen as a healer. Where a 7-year-old girl dies because bias was more powerful than evidence. That world killed Emma Castellano. That world arrested Marcus Webb. That world protected Marcus Draven for 9 years. We have to do better. We have to demand better. Because the next video might not go viral. The next family might not have the resources to sue. The next officer might not face consequences. And the next child might not get a second chance that Emma didn't get. Hit subscribe. Share this story. Demand accountability. Because silence is complicity and complicity kills.